Playing in front of, at the Spectrum in front of all those people, like 18 or 19 or 20,000 people, was pretty much the norm for what I had been doing before that, because I was in Sabbath before that. So none of that was ever stunning to me. And I had been in a band that had opened for Deep Purple for a lot of years as well. So none of that was kind of overwhelming to me. I think the only overwhelming part is that it's you who has brought the people in. I mean, before I'm playing with other people, and it's suddenly it's you who was the focal point of this. So that was pretty special. But for me, it was always the fact that I'm a huge sports fan, and the Flyers are always one of the nemesis of my team, the Rangers, and Philadelphia was a great team, the Broad Street Bullies in those days, and we got a chance to be in this mecca of sports, and that was more important to me than doing the gig until the show starts. When the show starts, it's different. I mean, you're playing for people who want to see this and people that you want to please, and you want to please yourself. But for me, it was the fact that it was again a mecca of sports, and a shrine for me in some ways. So that was the best part for me.
Well, going back to, what was it, 1986, it was a series of firsts for me. It was the first time I've ever been in a band that was headlining Coliseums. It was the first time to be filmed by the NFL film team, which was pretty cool. Those guys were great. We hung out with them backstage. So it was the first time being on stage with this man. And as corny as it sounds, he's my favorite singer. So being in a band with my favorite singer was, a dream come true. As corny as it sounds, but it was a wonderful experience for me. It was just amazing.
We're talking about a show now that featured a dragon. So obviously we need a lot of personnel to deal with it. I would say that the crew probably totaled, with a few exceptions, probably about 50 or so, about 50 people who had to put that up every night. It was hydraulic based, not nearly as sophisticated as things are today. So it was more on the heavy side. We needed, we must have had 7 or 8, huge semis just to carry the gear, and buses everywhere. It was a big production because it was thought big. We wanted it to be overwhelming. So therefore it needed all these, not only, probably the most important people are the guys who humped it together, got it together, brought it on the stage, but you have the wonderful people who dealt with using the hydraulics, and lighting designers. In that case it was Paul Dexter, who was our lighting designer, who conceived a lot of the show and had to correlate it and find the right people. So it was a massive enterprise. But there were a lot of people, and it needed a lot of people. I really miss the old giant things that we used to have behind us for the sake of the audience. So I think I would always feel that if the opportunity arose, I'd like to do that again. It was great the first, 500 times around, and I'm sure it'll be just as good. But again, to me, it's always been the point that the audience is who we tried to please. We always considered, just to date us because it was a while ago, when you went to Disneyland, you used to be able to get what was called an e-ticket. So those of you who don't know that anymore know that you pay one fee and then you go and you get all the rides. But you bought an e-ticket, you got the special package, and that special package got you more rides than anything else. So the e-ticket was, I've got an e-ticket. Well, we always wanted our show to be an e-ticket at Disneyland, because the show was Disneyland. It was fantasy. It was to take you away from the cold outside and the cold you're going to face when you get out of there, and to leave you with memories that are exceptional. So I would always, again, if the opportunity arose, if it was feasible to do from a lot of different directions, do it in a heartbeat. I should tell you about the dragon that was on the stage. And the dragon was called Dean. He was Dean the Dragon. There were others who called him other things, but he was always Dean to us. Again, I think you need to personalize what you have. And we did. We personalized him. He was Dean. The dragon was, I think, 20 feet.
Easily.
20 feet
Easily.
Tall. He was perched upon about an 8-foot riser that housed our drummer. And in the front of that riser there was a part of the dragon that came apart and revealed his heart, because the tour was called Sacred Heart, obviously, and we wanted to have a heart. So his innards came apart, and there was a beating heart that was laser generated, and we carried full production. I mean, from lasers, full pyro. I mean, I'm sure that our pyro rivaled some of the 4th of July things at times. But the dragon was the centerpiece of it all. And it was all down to the man who operated him. He was the best. Steve Arch, his name was, and still is, I hope. Steve made that thing look as though it had come from a real place, and you were seeing it in a real place. When we first created the Dragon, we gave it to a company. It was called FM. FM were the people who we had given the contract to build it with, and so they were in San Francisco. So we took a trip up, Wendy and I, one day, Wendy Dio, that is, took a trip up to San Francisco to see how the progress had been going, and they showed us the head of the Dragon. We went in and we looked at it and said, he looks like a crocodile. Well, you know, what's wrong with him? And we couldn't figure it out. And then we did figure it out. His ears didn't move. So they put movement in his ears, so they would go forward and backward. And suddenly he came to life because he had movement other than just the stiffness of the neck movement and this. And then Steve Arch, whom I mentioned to you before, just took it to another dimension. It became part of him. He made it move like it was a real
That's
animal.
right. That's
and
right.
so it was real to us, and I'm sure at some points it was real to other people. When he breathed fire, the audience would always shrink back at least 2 or 3 rows because he was that impressive. He was our centerpiece of the Sacred Heart tour, and he never let us down once. He only collapsed in the very last show. I think it was, and it wasn't in Japan. Yes, it was. It was a Japanese show. And at his very last breath of fire, he just suddenly leaned over and fell onto the drummer. And that was the end for him. It was our last show, and he didn't die. He just passed out. He had a lot to drink that day. It was the last show, a lot of sushi.
He was hungover.
Yes, sake going down, you know. But that was Dean, and he was something special, and I still have him, by the way.
When we would do sound check, the fire marshal would come in to make sure that everything was okay, because he was a real fire-breathing dragon. And once in a while, every now and then, there'd be almost like lava that would come out of his mouth and light the carpet on fire. And we'd have on stage we'd be playing, go, put fire out, you know, and then walk away. But it was really great. It was really great.
And it was never just the Dragon. There were,
There was all sorts of things.
12-foot knights on either side of the stage who had lasers in their eyes, who fought each other. There were other things that came out from the middle of his of the Dragon's stomach. There was among the first laser animation, live laser animation that was carried around everywhere that we used as well. There were bats and wizards and all things that flew here and there within the confines of the laser images. It was stunning. Again, the pyrotechnics that were involved with it as well were amazing. I had a sword that was a laser sword that used to slay the Dragon every night, or didn't really, Dean and I did our thing. We had at one time laser guitars surrounded with just LEDs. It was unbelievable, unbelievable. So it wasn't just Dean, but again, he was a centerpiece, but everything happened in that show. It just went on and it never stopped. The Sacred Heart Tour was a great tour for the 2 years that we did it, because it was so productive and so interesting that we did do it actually for 2 years. We were on the road with it. It makes no sense to have something like that that is being so successful and to tuck it away and go on to something else. But during that period, we had changed guitar players. And we had done the first part of the Sacred Heart with Vivian Campbell, and the second part with Craig. So
that would make me a highlight.
That's right. It would make him a highlight. But for me, it had to be a low light, because the band that started playing that band in Dio was Vinny Appice, myself, Vivian Campbell, Jimmy Bain. That was and at that time Claude Schnell was playing with us as well. So that was the band, and suddenly it was, without one of the people who founded it. And our consternation, of course, was, will this work? What will we do? How are we going to be accepted, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where Craig came in, and so that was a highlight. It was a low light when Viv was gone, and a hell of a highlight when Craig came in and was able to do all the things that we needed him to do, plus more. So I don't see any other lows or highs within that show other than those things for me, because the show always worked. It never was a letdown for me.
When I first joined the band, the fans only knew me from Jafria, not from where my true heart lied. And so, but Ronnie knew me from where my true heart lied. And so when I joined the band, especially during the guitar solo, people would be, flipping me off, And and Vivian #1 and things like that.